Gaze reading where the greats drop by. Trendy authors tell us all the who, what, and why. Anyone can listen, cause we're spoiler free. Gaze reading, from Pulitzer stars to book club picks, where the curious minds can get their fix. So you say you're not gay, well that's okay. There's something for everyone. Gaze reading.
Hello and welcome to Gaze Reading. I'm your host, Jason Blitman, and on today's episode, we have Karissa Chen, the author of Homeseeking, which was January's Good Morning America's book club pick, and Paul Lisicky, whose book Songs So Wild and Blue comes out today. Their bios are in the show notes. There has been so much in the news these days about deep fakes. And so I'm going to release my live conversation with the author Sarah Slygar, who talks to me about her book Vantage Point, which is all about deepfakes. So I'm going to release that later this week. If you're not already following Gaze Reading on Instagram, you're going to want to do that because next week I have an insane giveaway that will be posted there. And you can also find us over on Blue Sky, Gaze Reading, wherever you find your things. We're also over on YouTube. So you could watch this conversation over on YouTube as well. While you are doing the things and supporting this little indie podcast, it would mean so much if you could like and subscribe to Gaze Reading wherever you get your podcasts. Not only does it help with the algorithm, but you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops, which, as you know, one is happening this week. And I mention it all the time, but if you could also leave a 5-star review when you have a chance, especially on Apple Podcasts, that, again, means so much and is super, super helpful. I had someone reach out to me recently saying that it's a little confusing how to get to writing a review on Apple Podcasts. And so if you are on there and you click Gaze Reading underneath the episode title, so, you know, the one that's running right now, and then it'll take you to the main page, and you scroll to the bottom of that, you go past the last few episodes, and that's where you'll see the sort of stars. You could click the stars and then type a review. Thank you in advance. Thank you to those of you who have done that already. And now, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Karissa Chen and Paul Lisicky. Karissa, welcome to Gaze Reading, here to talk to me about Homeseeking.
Thank you.
The finished copy has just been like sitting on my shelf. I haven't really touched it, and I'm like thrilled about it because I've been like rifling through the galley and like bending it and marking it up and everything. So I'm like, I felt like I needed to hold up the finished copy now, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah,
Like,
you know what? It's so funny. I like don't even have a finished copy. I think I just have my galley that I'm just like, it's totally messed up at this point.
Yeah, when you do finally get your finished copy, the texture is very nice.
Yay. I'm glad to hear that.
There are too many things to talk about, but before we properly dive in about the book, this is something that we could talk about probably the whole hour that we're together. The last 5 years and musicals. Welcome to Gaze Reading. This is all we're going to talk about.
Yes!
So, in the information that your publicist sends, in every interview that you've done, you've brought up the last 5 years as the inspiration for the structure of the book, which we'll talk about in a minute. But let's talk about the last 5 years. When did you first learn about it? Have you seen a production? Do you know it's coming to Broadway this year?
Of course. Oh my God, this makes me so happy because I feel like most of the time I bring it up and people are like, huh? Like, what does this have to do with anything?
We're talk about Jason Robert Brown. Let's bring it up.
Yes. I think like I was dating a guy who is a composer and he was really into musical. Oh, obviously, he's like composing musical theater. And I had not heard of this musical we started dating in, I don't remember, like 2017 or something like that. I don't even remember the timeline anymore. But like right around when I was starting this book, and I had heard of Parade, obviously, but I hadn't heard of the last 5 years. So I think it's a little bit more under the radar. And he was like, if you like Parade, you should listen to this. This is like a cult classic. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a go. And the first time I listened to it, I have to admit, I didn't love it. Some of the songs are great, and then some of them are like a little less great. And that Jamie guy seems like a total dick, which he is.
Yeah.
I was like, why would I listen to this? But then, I don't know, there's something about it that I kept coming back to. And when I was at this residency, I was just like, oh my God, I'm just gonna keep listening to it. But yeah, it's just like the structure is really innovative. I just loved so much about how like we really get to understand the relationship, and we get this like feeling of like, you want to root for them, but you know how it ends up, and then you're mad at them and like him. And I don't know. It's just, yeah. So I listened to both versions of the albums that are on. And I was like comparing which one do I like better. And then like during COVID, they had that like COVID production. Did you see that COVID production?
I didn't watch it, but I'm very aware of what you're talking about.
Oh my God, that was so good. That one was like really good because they did like, they shot it in one go or whatever in like this tiny little cramped room.
Like apartment,
yeah. And I was like, this is like very innovative. Like I was very impressed because it was like a way to bring theater in during COVID, which I was like, this is amazing. And then it came to Taiwan a couple of years ago.
Oh.
And so I dragged my husband to go see it. And and so that was fun. And then, now it's coming to Broadway. And I was like, Nick Jonas, but okay, like I'll still see it. Yeah.
Adrienne Warren, who's playing Kathy, she's going to be great. So that's fine. And then there was the movie with Anna Kendrick.
Oh my God,
and Jeremy Jordan.
I forgot about that. Yes, I did watch the movie. And I love Jeremy Jordan. I like Anna Kendrick too, like in her movies and stuff like that. I think she's fun, but she's like not my ideal Kathy. And like Jeremy Jordan's a little like too sexy for me to like. I was
him.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's so interesting because you say you were like debating on which cast recording you liked better. Yeah. And as someone who like came of age listening to the original off-Broadway cast recording, I like that to me is the definitive version.
Yeah.
But what's so also funny is that you said, how could anyone like the character of Jamie?
Yeah.
Jason Robert Brown basically wrote it based on his own life. And so in turn, he's Jamie and in turn not very likable. And you're like, dude, what are you doing?
I know. There was like, I read about the whole like lawsuit behind it where like his ex like sued him and he had to change a bunch of the songs. And I was like, this is very juicy for like a little like off-Broadway. I was like, very juicy.
Did you always had a love of musical theater?
Yes, I always loved musical theater. My mom would play Andrew Lloyd Webber compilations a lot when I was growing up. And so I really wanted to see Phantom of the Opera. And my mom finally promised me that for my 8th birthday, I could see the Phantom of the Opera. So that was the first musical I ever saw. And then after that, I was like, I want to see Les Mis. It was like all the things. So I was just like, because I would listen to these soundtracks and not know what it would look like. So I'd imagine what it would be like. And then going to see the real thing, it was so different than what I imagined. But I was like, oh my God, it's so magical. So yeah, I'm like.
Does your husband appreciate it or does he go kicking and screaming with you?
He will go with me. So like I said, he's Taiwanese. So he doesn't really speak English or understand English. So we have to go see like the productions in Taiwan where they have subtitles. Or like what I've done for him before is, like for instance, I really wanted to see Wicked, but I was like, it hasn't come to Taiwan. But now that the movie is out, I took him to see the movie while we were in Taiwan so that he would like at least have like the background, like the version with the subtitles in the movie.
Right.
And I was like, once part 2 comes out and we've seen both parts, then we'll go see like the musical on Broadway so that you get it.
That's so cute.
Yeah. I think he enjoys it, but I think it's just more like he like never grew up with it. So he's like trying to catch up to what it is about it that I'm like so into.
Sure.
Yeah.
What is it that you're so into?
I don't even know. You know what? Like I love everything about it. I love like the music. I love like the production, like the razzle dazzle of it all.
And I ask because there are some people that I know who are like allergic to musicals.
I
the
know.
Idea of people like breaking out into song and dance, they just cannot wrap their minds around.
I just love it. I think like, it feels like to me the way like if we were less self-conscious, maybe that's how we would be. There are times when I do want to break out into song because I'm so happy or I'm so sad.
I was going to say your emotions are so big that you have to release it in some way.
Yeah. And I love that that's how musicals do that thing. Like they're like this emotion, this moment is so heightened that the only possible way that it can be portrayed is through song. That is the only way. And it's not subtle, but we have other subtle forms of media.
Right, there's room for all of it.
Exactly. So that's why we like, K-dramas and stuff too, right? Because like the heightened emotion, I think sometimes for some people, I get it, like it feels too over the top or whatever. But I think that like sometimes it is nice to feel like the feeling that you're holding quietly inside you displayed in this big blown out way. And the number of times that I sang on my own by myself in the bathtub because my crush didn't like me back. Like there's no other way I could have expressed myself.
That's incredible. Oh my God. I'm obsessed. Did you ever perform?
So I did musical theater in high school.
Okay.
I was not I'm not the best actress or whatever, so I was always in the chorus.
Okay.
But
What shows
I
did you
loved
do
it.
in high school?
I did 42nd Street in Oklahoma.
Oh, classic.
Yeah, and then I was in the stage crew for Guys and Dolls, and then I did.
Every high school does Guys and Dolls.
Yeah, yes. I don't know. It's a very
High school.
every high
Musical
yeah.
about gambling.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, and like lots of women. I don't know. Yeah, and then we did one that was, oh my God, now I'm totally blanking out what it's called. I had to wear a blonde wig for it because everyone was blonde. Oh my God, what was it called?
What's it about? Do you remember?
It's like a blonde girl, a blonde showgirl, and then her like blonde friends, and then they're on like a cruise ship.
Crazy
I
for
wanna
you?
say.
No.
I
On a
don't
cruise ship,
remember.
blonde girl, blonde foot. Anything goes?
It
No.
wasn't anything
I'll think
goes.
about it. We'll get there.
Oh yeah.
You're gonna
I
have to
bought
DM
this one
me.
from my- I bought this one from my memory because I was like, I wore a short bob, like a pink bob.
That's
through the whole, and it
so
was
funny.
when I was at my high school in Hong Kong. So we were all Asian girls wearing these short pink bobs. That was just like, it was
Oh my
very
God.
weird.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, if my listeners have made it this far, they're like, why are we talking about musicals? So in every, like I said, in all of your interviews, you talked about last 5 years
Yes.
inspiring Homeseeking, or inspiring the structure of Homeseeking.
Yeah.
And if anyone is very familiar with the last 5 years, you saying that is not a spoiler, but it is a little an Easter egg for something to expect perhaps in the middle of the book. So I was excited to see that structure coming to fruition. Okay, for listeners who have not picked up the book yet, which I don't know what you've been waiting for, because at the point of this episode getting released, it's been out for 2 months now. Can you tell us your elevator pitch for Homeseeking?
Yeah. So Homeseeking is about two childhood friends who grew up in the same Shanghainese neighborhood during the Sino-Japanese War. So that's like the 1930s and 40s. And they grew up together. They fall in love. They have these dreams of having a future together and being married. But before that can happen, the Chinese Civil War breaks out and they are separated. Hyphen, the male character, he ends up joining the army and he ends up in Taiwan, and Suchi ends up in Hong Kong, and they meet again in their 70s in LA. And at that point in time, they are exploring the possibility of having a second chance together. And while that seems like I gave a lot away, actually a lot of it is told up front.
Yeah, a lot of that is very early on in the book. And then it's really about, it becomes this story about these people and the
Yes.
lives that they've lived leading up to that point.
Yeah.
You just talked about dreams. Your website, which is gorgeous,
Thank you.
by the way, calls yourself a writer, an editor, and a dreamer. What are some of the, what do you dream of?
I think I'm a very like romantic, like a hopeless romantic. That's what all my friends would say, that I'm a hopeless romantic and an idealist. And I always am like, I'm always like thinking about what can I do like next in my life. I'm always thinking about, I have these like ideas of like, where am I going to go? And what am I going to do in the future? I also think I also have a lot of like nightmares. I don't think everybody has this. And I didn't realize this until recently, that not everybody has dreams every single night that they can remember.
Yeah.
And I have very vivid dreams, and I also have very vivid nightmares. And so
I'm
like
going to say
literally.
that I think that means you also sleep well,
Does it?
because you only hit your dreams when you're in your REM cycle.
I guess.
And I feel like I probably don't like sleep consistently enough to get to there. But okay, so you're very good at remembering your dreams.
Yes, I remember
and your
like,
nightmares.
Yeah, like my husband is, I've never had a dream. He's had one dream in his life that he remembers or something like
Okay.
that. And I like have nightly like dreams that I remember, and like very vivid dreams, very vivid nightmares. And so I think it's both literal in that sense that I am a dreamer, that I like remember my dreams. But I also, I am someone who's like very like hopelessly romantic, and like
Yeah.
I just always am thinking about what is the next thing that I can do in my life. And
I love not only that's true for you, but I love that is a way in which you define yourself.
yeah,
Because I think that's a very optimistic way of seeing the world, which I think is super cool.
I am pretty optimistic in most people.
Something about the book that is magical / stressed me out is it's this deep story of reconnection.
Hmm.
And I'm curious if you have had an experience like that in your life where you were reconnected to a person, an object, a space that changed you or affected you in a way that was surprising.
Ooh, I love that question. I feel like I could probably answer that in multiple ways because I do feel like I love like the coincidence of like reconnection or like this feeling of like kismet in certain
Hmm.
ways. The one that is popping to mind really quickly that is not the one that I would have thought would pop to mind, but this is really funny. Like my first quote unquote boyfriend in ninth grade, like we like dated for like literally a week or something like that. And it was like very dramatic for all the reasons that you can imagine when you're 14. And then it was like we hated each other and
Hmm.
whatever. And he was really mean to me. And then all his friends were really mean to me and all these, it's very stupid. And then one day, like many years later, I was sitting at a Starbucks and I was writing and I look up and I was at one of those communal tables and I look
Hmm.
up and sitting right across from me is that guy.
Mm.
And I look at him and I said his name and he looked at me, he said, Karissa. And we just started chatting. We just started talking and it was like a really great conversation. He was telling me about what his wife was doing and he was married by then. And I was telling him I was writing and taking it very seriously. And it was just a really great conversation. And eventually we started talking about being 14 and how stupid it was.
Mm.
And I don't know, it wasn't like I had been harboring this like I need for a closure with this person for all those years, but it was so nice to run into him and talk about it and have this conversation and acknowledge how silly we were, but also that like we had hurt each other in
Mm.
certain ways. And it just, and like to find out that he was doing all right and I was doing all right and all that, like it was a total coincidence.
Yeah.
But then it felt right. It felt like the universe had thrown us together in that space
Yeah.
to be able to talk that out. And I don't know, I just really liked it. Like I felt really at peace after that.
Hmm. I love that happened to you. I love that came to mind. I think things like that happen to me. I don't want to say all the time, but it feels like things happen. That's not
Yeah.
an unusual occurrence for me.
Yeah.
And so when things like that happen in books, I see that as totally normal. And I
Yeah.
know there are other people, not dissimilar from what you're saying about dreams, who like those sorts of things just never happen to
Yeah.
them. And so it in turn, when it happens in a story, it seems so unrealistic.
Yeah.
And so I'm just excited that came to mind.
Yeah, I think so because I've had conversations with people about coincidence in fiction, and
Yeah.
some people can't tolerate it because they're like, that doesn't happen and it's so unrealistic and it's too much. And I'm like, I get it. I do understand why sometimes coincidences feel contrived.
Hmm.
But I think oftentimes like stories operate on coincidence, right? Like you have to make things happen.
Right. It is
But
a story.
it's a story, right? If you just narrated your daily life, it'd be extremely boring. But I do think coincidences happen. And I think the interesting thing to me about coincidences that happen in real life is that we're the ones that assign meaning to it,
Hmm.
right? You could choose to just see it as it just happened to be that way. But if you think about all the major things that have happened in your life, a lot of them turn on a coincidence, right? If
Hmm.
I hadn't been in this particular place, if I hadn't met this particular person, then I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah.
And it's only in retrospect that you look back and you're like, you either feel like, oh, that was a coincidence, or you feel like, oh, like it was meant to be. And that depends upon like your way of seeing the world. I think that as humans, we crave meaning. So at least for me, my impetus is to assign meaning to things, even if maybe it totally is just a coincidence.
And not even just assign meaning to things, but also the fact that you ran into this guy. It doesn't have to quote unquote mean something, but
Right.
it is the universe saying, here's a moment of reconnection.
Totally.
Which
Yeah,
I
like-
guess is a meaning.
Yeah, it's not like the meaning is like you should marry this, but it's definitely, hey, there was this, and I don't think I realized I wanted that resolution
Yeah.
until we were reconnected. Like I said, it wasn't like I was like pining over this like situation
Mhm.
years later, but once we had talked it through and that was laid to rest, I was like, that's great. Like, I never have to, I can look at this part of my life in a completely different light now.
Yeah.
Because it's ended in a different way than it had ended. It had
Right.
ended in a really ugly way where we were like mean to each other.
Yeah.
And in my mind, he like bullied me or got his friends to bully me or whatever it was, right? But like instead, it now had this other resolution where I could feel happier about
Right.
it. Yeah.
And not to say you were losing sleep over it, but
Yeah.
it still just was, it changed the ending of that story.
Totally.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You said that you're surprised that's what came to mind. Is there like a genre of something that you had really more expected to think about?
I think.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think because I would think if you gave me more time to think about this, let's say I was answering this in a written interview,
Yeah.
I probably would have picked out something that is like more meaningful to my life as a whole.
Yeah.
Right? Like a connection
sense.
with a guy that I do pine over or I did pine over or whatever.
Did lose
you know?
sleep over.
Yeah, lose sleep over, or something with friend
Uh.
connections and things like that. Things that really did impact me. And
Mhm.
I think that if I really sat down and thought a bit, like later after we're done with this interview, I'll probably be like, oh, I should have brought this one up instead. This one's way cooler.
No, there's something fun about it
But,
being
yeah.
so benign.
Yeah,
And that's what's so special to me, is that like these things just happen.
totally.
And it's actually funny that you said that's not the first thing that came to mind, or you're surprised it's the first thing that came to mind for you. The first thing that came to mind for me when I was thinking about this question yesterday is the like blanket that I slept with as a child. My mom had in storage for many years and then later gave it back to me. And so now it's just like sitting in my closet. But receiving that for the first time and like feeling it, just remembering what it felt like that meant so much to me. That was the first thing that came to mind. But as we're sitting here talking, a gift that a dear friend gave me years ago now, I have these childhood home videos where I'm puppeteering a marionette Mickey Mouse. And it was like very impactful for me as a kid. And then 20 years go by and one of my best friends gifted me from eBay the marionette Mickey Mouse. And even though it wasn't the exact same thing, like opening that and seeing that, it is one of the most meaningful gifts that anyone has ever given to me, because it just it punched me in the gut in such a surprising way.
Oh, did you cry?
100%.
I would have
100%.
cried. Yeah.
Again, it like took me by surprise. I
Yeah.
never even thought that I'd ever see that in the flesh again.
Oh, I love that.
And so having experiences like that in my real
Mhm.
life, I think heightened reading Homeseeking for me.
Oh, I'm glad.
In other interviews, you've talked about the title taking a minute to come to you, that you are never going to unearth what some of your original titles were.
Yeah.
I'm not going to harass you into them, even though I'm very curious. But there's something so interesting to me about the word seeking. So I'm curious, what does seeking home mean to you?
Yeah. That's a really great question. I am someone who also moved around a bit when I was
Mm.
younger. And I think I've always struggled with that question of what does it mean to have a home? Because I thought I knew what it was when I just lived in one place and I had all my friends around me. But then I moved and I resisted it. I was like, this is not home. But I think that we, like humans, have a desire to want to create like roots, right? Like space that feels like a place where they belong. And without my consent, I ended up starting to feel like, okay, this new place is like home. But and then you end up leaving that and you're like, oh my God, I'm just like leaving like places that I thought I had come to feel was mine. And I'm leaving again, and I'm leaving bits of part of me. And then I'm leaving things that cannot be replaced. Wherever I go, I miss something about some place. And I just think for me, after a while, I started to feel like I didn't know where I belonged or like where home was, and searching for that. Not just searching, right? Because searching, if you're making that distinction between the word seeking and searching, to me, searching feels like, oh, you're just looking for something.
Right.
In a way, seeking.
Like it was lost.
Yeah, like it was lost.
Yeah.
And like you're trying to, but seeking is like this, like, you know, you are really, yes, it's a searching, but it's also, there's something like laser focused about trying to seek. I don't know how to like, do you know what I'm saying?
I do. I think what I'm hearing from you is that Homeseeking is more about a feeling.
Yeah.
And let's say home searching, you're like looking for something specific, whereas home
Right.
seeking is more like you'll know it when you feel it.
Yeah, like you're trying to claim something for yourself.
Right.
And I think that's why I have been asked in interviews, like, what does home mean to you? And to be honest, like, I am still trying to figure that out. I'm someone who spends most of my time in Taiwan, but I grew up in the States. And every time I come back to the States, it very much feels like home to me. But now so much of my life is in Taiwan. And like, I am still figuring out what home means to me and trying to, like, that process of finding out not just the where of it, but also what the definition of it is part of that seeking, right?
Well, I mean, even you saying it coming to the States, it feels like home to you. I think through the same thing, right? Moving from New York, I go back to New York and it quote unquote feels like home to me. But I guess I've never even sat to think, what does it feeling like home mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And is that important? And is it that I have friends here? Is it that I'm comfortable in the city, that I can get around? I don't, maybe yes to all of that, but also is it like a missing piece of myself that where I feel comfortable there? Is it, it doesn't need to be the four walls of a building that, or a space that I'm living in. As a person who's moved around a lot since leaving New York City, I'm constantly trying to figure out what home means to me because it has never been a space.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that's part of it. Yeah. Like for me, I realize that different places bring out different sides of me. And like that comfort of being like, oh, like when I'm here, I can be myself in this way. And when I'm in this other place, I can be myself in this way. But I think part of what I find frustrating sometimes is like there is no place at this point. I don't feel like there's any place where I feel like, oh, I am always wholly myself. And so does that mean that I don't have any home, or does that mean that I have multiple homes, but they're just different? They speak to different parts of me.
Well, and it's interesting because like the reuniting of Suchi and Hyphen, they're able to fill in gaps for each other that haven't existed for decades.
Yes. Yeah.
And so even though they clearly don't complete each other's home, literally, you know, whatever,
Right.
there is that sort of history that comes into play, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
And so much of the book as well, obviously, is about memories. And I think home, as we're, I think, each unpacking for ourselves, is about memories, right? You go back to the States, a lot of it is about memories. I go back to New York, a lot of it is about memories. And I feel at points, these characters are also trying to suppress memories.
Yes. Yes, totally.
Because sometimes memories
are painful.
Are very painful.
Yeah.
And there are other things too that I think are like, things can be so deeply a part of us that we don't even remember how they came to be. Like a nickname. You know, do you have that? Are there things, obviously you might not even remember because you don't remember how they came to be.
It's interesting because I do feel like I have these really distinct memories of being like around 5 or whatever, and like staring in the mirror and staring at really like for a really long time and just being like, how am I me? Like, why do people call me my name? And like, why is it that when they call my name, they're like, they see this? Like, I remember just like having this like existential crisis as a 5-year-old and just staring in the mirror for a really long time, like not really understanding or like trying to wrap my little head around the fact that like, I am who I am and that somebody gave me a name. And then that was just like, that's it. Like, that's your name and that's who you are. And
when's your birthday?
May 27th, I'm a Gemini.
That's so funny. Okay, mine is April 6th and I'm an Aries, but my husband is a Gemini. And so these sort of, I feel none of this is strange to me. I 100% get it. Okay.
Like, I get it now.
No, because I feel like I did a version of that too.
And it's really interesting now because I have a 2-year-old and watching him come into his conscience of who he is, his consciousness of, oh, my name is whatever. And he responds to that name or like even being cognizant of the way that like we talk about him to himself in the way, because I realize that we're telling him a story about himself that is shaping like his own conception of himself, right? So being careful of being like, oh, you're really good at this. Or, oh, you're very smart at this, because I don't want him to think like, oh, this is like who I am before he's decided who he is. But like seeing that happen in real time is really interesting, because I know that all the stories we tell him now, all the things that we're doing now, like he won't remember, right? Because he's 2. So like most of these memories are going to be gone. He won't remember the first time that like he realized that this is his name or like whatever. And yet this is an active part of making him into who he is, which is
Mhm.
a lot of responsibility and terrifying. But
Yeah.
really interesting because I'm like, oh, we all went through this. Like we all were told stories about ourselves that are now
Mhm.
integrated into our sense of self.
And again, so much of this of Homeseeking is about that, is about
Yeah.
family, is about how we each make up who we are. And I know that when you started the book, you
Mhm.
said, I think in your acknowledgments, that your son wasn't even a
Mhm.
thought.
Yeah.
And then you finish the book, you're doing copy edits, and you have a child.
Yes.
What was that journey like for you, writing this deeply rooted in family story to end with having a family?
Yeah, totally. It's such an interesting process because when I started the book, I was really empathizing with the the children in the story, like
Yeah.
knowing, oh my gosh, I can't imagine being separated from my mom at 19 or 17 or whatever it is. You're basically a kid and how scary that must be and how sad and lonely it must be because like I rely on my mom for so many things. Even now, I'm like 42 years old and I still will call my mom and be like, Mom, help me with this. I need
Well,
your
and
opinion.
not only separated, but separated and not allowed to
Yeah,
reconnect. Right,
totally.
right.
Like, I can't imagine. Like, at least now, like, I do live really far from my mom because she lives in the States and I'm in Taiwan.
Yeah,
I can message her, I can
right,
like FaceTime
right.
her. And I think the closest I ever got to a feeling of like terror that we might be separated was actually during COVID when,
Mm,
I didn't know, when none of us knew how that was going to turn out. And I was like, oh my God, what if this gets really bad and I never see my mom again, or if it's years and years until I see her again. And I remember feeling really scared because I was working on this book at the time
mhm,
and family separation was on my mind. But so for a long time, my focus was definitely just on, oh, what is it like to be separated from your nuclear family from such a young age and not
mm,
have that support and have to go through the rest of your life knowing that you've been separated from this family. And then as I became a mom, obviously I empathized with the mothers in this book from the beginning. And I don't think it's that hard to imagine how heartbreaking it must have been for them.
mhm,
But becoming a mom really put that in focus for me because
mhm.
all of a sudden I had this child that, like, they are not joking when they're like, your idea of love changes completely. It's a love you've never experienced. It sounds so hyperbolic, and it sounded so hyperbolic to me. Even when I was pregnant, I was like, how different can it be? Like, I've loved people before. But it is totally different knowing now, like when I look at him and I think, God, if I were to be separated from him forever and not know what happened to him and not know if he's alive and
Mhm,
well, I don't know how you survive that. I don't know how you get
mhm,
through your days. And that really, it changed a lot of the way that I looked at my characters in the book and
mm.
what they were going through.
Did you change anything in the book after that, do you think?
I did rewrite one chapter.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there was one chapter that I had written and I completely changed it. I mean, this was at the suggestion of my editor. So my editor was the one that was like, maybe it was like a chapter that was right after she had given birth to her son.
Mm,
And I had written this whole chapter. And my editor was kind of like, maybe we cut this and we make him just a little bit older so that it becomes that chapter when he's like around 4 or 5. And I was writing that with, at the time, I don't know, my son was like 3 months old, 4 months old. And I was writing that with this little baby, in
yeah.
another room and being really aware of all the ways that motherhood was difficult,
Mm,
and was really different than what I had expected it to be, but also all the ways that like I wanted to be better as a mom
hmm.
and hoped that I would continue to be better for him. And also knowing that one day, he would leave me and have his own life. And so all of that was bundled into this like one rewritten chapter. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, my sister has a 2.5-year-old who she's very much coming into her own. It's hilarious, but is pregnant with her second.
Oh, wow.
And I'm the oldest of three. And she says to me, now I know for a fact that you are mom's favorite because no matter what, I will love this second kid so much, but there will be nothing ever that replaces the
Mhm.
relationship that I have with my firstborn. And she's the youngest, my sister. So it just was and she's, at one point she might have talked about it in frustration, and now she talks about it in just fully understanding what it means to have a firstborn. And just like the relationship with your secondborn and your thirdborn are all, and your last are all different.
Right.
So it's very interesting seeing her process that as well, just from a different perspective.
Totally.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I'm the oldest, and I have 2 younger siblings. I don't think I'm the one that's most loved, though, to be honest. I don't think that's true. But yeah, I do have 2 siblings, and it is really, I think my thing now is more like, oh, I totally understand like why my parents are to us the way that they are a little bit. And then I feel like bad about being, because then I realized that now that I have a kid, I was like, oh, this is like the ultimate unrequited love. Because of course you love your parents, but I realize now having a kid that like, there is no way that you love your parents as much as they love you. They just love you so much more than you love them. And it is the ultimate heartbreak. I just know this little kid is going to grow up and break my heart. It's fine. I want him to have his own life. It's totally fine. But I also know I'm like, just waiting.
It's like setting your kids up for failure, though. Like we will never, it's like impossible for us to share that love.
I just can't. I'm sorry, Mom. Yeah.
Okay, Suji has a sister, Sulan. They're very close. They go through a lot together. This is not a spoiler, and this is not explicitly said in the book anywhere, but I have to ask, is she a lesbian?
Yes.
Yes!
Yes. It was challenging to try to write about it because I imagined that at that time, like it just wouldn't be something that they would talk about.
No.
It's not something that they probably even ever want to admit out loud, I think. But I'm someone who doesn't develop my characters ahead of time. I let them reveal to me who they are as I'm writing. And like through the writing, like Sulan just showed me that's like who she was. And like this, and if I could have written a whole other book about Sulan, I would have. She has a whole other like life and story. Like she is one of my favorite characters just because she has all these aspirations for herself and all these things she wants to do and the frustrations in her own life because she is trapped in a man's world. She is trapped in a world that is obviously very heteronormative and like traditional, and she can never quite escape that totally. But she's doing her best, and so I loved writing her. And there was a point when I was drafting this novel where she had a bunch of her own chapters, and then I had to be like, okay, this doesn't fit in the book. but like, you know, she does in my head. She has her own book that's going on.
Well, and it's obvious how richly drawn the character is for me to see that along the way. And I felt for her that she couldn't really talk about it. It's clear why she can't. And again, it's not necessarily overt and none of it is a spoiler. But yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I feel for her.
There was a nugget early on where I think I like underlined and wrote a question mark. And I was like, I see you, girl. And then like 10 chapters later, she says, I told you, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh my God.
Wait, which part was it? What was the nugget that you underlined? Do you remember?
I think it was like, I don't want to get married. You don't understand. And I was like,
you're like,
okay, girl, I'm clocking you. And then later, it was like truly, it's like the first quarter of the book and then the fourth quarter of the book, which is, I've already told you, I'm never getting married. I can't get married. You don't understand. I was like, oh, girl's a lesbian. So funny.
But it's the thing, I felt so bad for her because I feel her sister's her best friend. And yet this is something that she felt like she couldn't even tell her best friend, basically, because of the time and like the situation. And, you know, she's sitting sidelined to watching this like grand romance play out in front of her. And while, of course, her sister's dealing with all kinds of horrible shit herself, but in a way, there's some envy in that. I think that she feels like, at least you can wear this heartbreak on your sleeve. But Sulan left behind people too, and she doesn't get to talk about it. And in my mind, I imagine that she's left behind someone she loves, and it's not something that she can ever talk about to anybody, not even the person closest to her, because she doesn't believe they'll understand. And so I think that, you know, Sulan has her own tragedies that she's dealing with. Yeah.
Yeah. You saying that reminds me, or made me think to share that the book, I think, really underlined for me the difference between not looking back versus running away. And you're not necessarily running away from your past so much as just needing to move forward and not harp on the things. But because you can't outrun your past either.
Right.
But harping on it is a bad thing.
Yeah. I feel like I thought about this a lot because of the way like my grandmother would deal with stuff. She passed away a couple years ago, but up until she died, she was like very no nonsense-y in a lot of ways. And a couple of years before she passed away, I had this conversation with her where she started telling me about stuff that had happened during the war. And she said it super matter-of-factly. And she was like telling me about how her brother like put his wife and his daughter on a boat with all of their most valuable possessions, and he was going to meet up with them later. And the boat sank and they died and everything, like all of the nice possessions were gone and he had nothing. But she said it in this she was just like, yeah, and then this happened and this happened. It was like she was just like telling you the synopsis of a play or something. And I was like, Grandma, that's horrible. She's like, what are you going to do about it? And like, that's the way it was at the time. And my father was overhearing this and he was like, wow, I never heard these stories either. And I was like, you've never heard these stories? And he was like, no. And I just realized like for her, she was just, what is the point of revisiting this and like thinking about the tragedy that it was? Because it happened and like you can't change anything about it. And she was like very much like this in all the stories that she would tell us. She would just be like, yeah, this is what happened. And I'd be like, these are so sad. And she'd be like,
I also think there was a time too where like babies dying was normal.
right.
And we're like, this crazy thing happening was totally normal. And life expectancy was
Right.
60. So it's just like,
and like when
oh,
everybody
wow.
around you is dealing with stuff,
Right.
you're just like, yeah, this is just like one more, right?
Right.
Everybody
It's a
we
Tuesday.
knew had stuff happening
Yeah.
to them. But to me, and I hear this a lot from friends who have trauma in their past, or like especially historical trauma from immigrant families or refugee families. And they're just like, people don't want to talk about it. They're just, what is the point? We're living a good life now. We're in a nice place and we have a good life and you guys are all safe and we're safe and we're happy. So what is the point of bringing up any of this stuff? Whereas, I think the younger generation, we are all like, therapy. Therapy is why. Like,
Unpack our trauma. Unpack our trauma. I also need to know what is my inherited trauma.
yeah, exactly. Like, I need to understand it all and like
Right.
take it apart. But they're just like, what? What is the point of that?
Yeah. The book is about so many things. Among the things is, I guess I will call the like sliding doors element, like the movie Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow, where, it's like the version where she gets on the train and the version where she doesn't get on the train.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of what ifs. I think for me, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I stayed in New York City. What is that? Do you have that for you? Do you have your like what if moment?
I have so many. I am such an indecisive person because I think that my life will be changed by every single decision I make. But it'll be even stuff like, what should I choose from the menu? And I agonize over my decision because I'm like, if I regret this. But I think because I'm so conscious of this like sense of what if I make the wrong decision? And because I know that like life changes based upon a single decision and you just never know like how things are going to turn out. And it terrifies me.
Okay, so this is where I feel like we're the same. Because you say like how ridiculous that you're agonizing over what to order on a menu.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, look, one of the things gives you food poisoning and that food poisoning stops you from getting on the bus and the bus gets into an accident. Like that decision at the restaurant changed your life.
Yes.
Which is like a terrible way to think about things.
No, I think about this all the time. Like, it's like also like when this is what I hate the most is like when I'm on my way to a flight or whatever. You get to the flight and they're like, hey, for $200, do you want to give up your seat or something? And sometimes I'm like, I have no place to go. I could use $200.
Right.
Like, yes, I'll do it. But then I always think to myself, what if I change my flight and this is the flight that goes down? But then I also think, what if this is the universe's way of letting me get out of the situation where I almost died, and I don't
it's
take
the opposite,
it,
right?
and I agonize over it because that's where my brain goes.
The plane's going down, and you're like, I should have taken the $200.
Exactly. Like that was God's lifeboat.
Oh
I'm
my
always
God!
like,
How do you get out of bed every day?
I have no idea. It's like, so terrifying to me. But I do
feel
have to say that once I agonize over this like decisions and like it takes me forever to make a decision over anything. But I think I'm also like the kind of person who like, once I've made the decision and I'm not dead, and I'm not so far, so it's good.
So you're a good decision maker,
Yeah,
clearly.
so
Right.
far it's been
Right.
okay. And I think
Yeah.
because I end up being optimistic about it, being like, I don't know how the other decision could have gone. I don't know if it would have been better. So it clearly, this is the way we're going to live out our life. And it's okay. It's fine so far. And I'm like, I choose to see the good in that. I think my characters, are also trying to deal with that, right? Because in the beginning, there's a point where Hyphen says to Suchi, when they're older, don't you ever think about if we had been together, I wish we could just have lived that life out together. And she's like, you can't regret it, because if we ended up together or whatever, if things had been different, you wouldn't have your kids. I wouldn't have my son.
Right.
And I think Hyphen also sees it when he goes back home and he sees, yes, he regrets leaving his family behind and missing all those years with them. But he also sees the lives that they led instead, whereas he has this really nice life in California. And on the one hand, of course, it's heartbreaking, the choice that he made and what it led to for him personally, the loss that he had personally. But at the same time, it's so complicated because if he had stayed behind, his life might not have been better. He wouldn't have met his wife. He wouldn't have these girls. I choose to think I must have made the right decision because my life is still pretty good. So.
Yeah. No, I love that. I want to be mindful of your time. So there are two things I want to ask you.
Yeah.
One, you have to answer in a brief way.
Okay.
Not to tell you how to answer questions, but
Okay.
you saying what you just said made me remember to ask you. There is a point in the book where they go see a psychic, a version of a psychic,
A fortune teller.
a fortune teller. Are you? Is that do you believe in that? Do you go to them? Do you have your tarot cards read?
I have a Chinese fortune teller that I've been going to since my 20s. And yes, and I always have taken it with a grain of salt, but she did predict that I would meet the guy I would marry when I was 36, in my like late 20s and early 30s, when I was dating someone else and was like, whatever.
I assume you did meet him when you were 36.
Yeah, so I married to a guy I met when I was 36. I don't know what to tell you.
It's very specific.
I know.
You are a former piano player and flautist, and that doesn't appear in the book at all, which surprised me.
Because I'm a very bad piano player and flautist. So that is not anything to write about.
Okay.
I do love karaoke, though. I do like singing.
Oh my God. In the spring, I'm going to come to New York. We're going to go see Last 5 Years and go karaokeing together.
Yes, let's do that.
Oh my God. So fun. Karissa Chen, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Everyone go get Homeseeking. Again, if you haven't already, this is coming out the end of February. And where have you been? Why have you not read it? This is your sign to pick up the book.
Yes, please pick it up.
And have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you. This is so much fun. It's such a pleasure.
Paul Lisicky, you are my guest gay reader today. Before I hear about your book, I have to know, what are you reading?
What am I reading? I am reading a book called Alligators. I have to write this down, or I had to. The Illustrated Guide to Their Biology, Behavior, and Conservation. And
I don't want to say, this is going to come across weird. That sort of shocks me. I was not expecting very specific nonfiction from you. I don't know why.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That I'm on sabbatical this semester.
Okay.
And it occurred to me, I spend so much time reading student work. And not just student work, but reading the kind of work that I would teach to my students. So it's in the last month or so, I've been in an extremely different realm. I just wrote an essay that featured an alligator. My boyfriend lives in Louisiana. We talk about alligators all the time.
This is all making sense now.
2 million alligators live in the state of Louisiana.
2 million?
2 million. And Louisiana is probably a third less in square mileage than Florida, which only has 1 million. How's that for facts?
What?
Exactly.
This is shocking to me.
It's the mascot of the state. You see the alligator represented on convenience stores and on schools, and it always has that toothy grin. But yeah, I wrote an essay about him and about his life in Louisiana and about our lives together there. And it had to the piece had to feature an alligator. I've been reading this book, and none of the information from the book has ended in the piece. But
it's keeping your
it's good.
interest.
It's good. It's not as illustrated as the title would lead you to think. I bought it I have a digital copy. Believe it or not, it was not published by a major press. It was published by Johns Hopkins University Press in 2020, and it cost $50.
The digital version or no? The physical
Digital
version
version costs $50 because there are no other alligator books. I know, it's crazy.
There are no. Why do I find that so hard to believe?
I found it hard to believe too. Most of the books out there featuring animals are essentially geared toward children. And
is there more to know?
Use
Dollars worth.
They can run as fast as humans for about 100 feet before they peter out.
I would guess that isn't a picture book for children, that fact.
I would think so.
You don't think so?
I do think so. Yeah. I think most of the picture books for children probably emphasize its toothiness and its grin, and they're probably good books and well-meaning and delightful, but it's really hard to find books about animals that aren't corralled and shaped by some point of view that emphasizes the human.
I didn't think I'd be talking about alligators so much this morning, but I love it. What is your general genre of choice?
My general genre of choice in recent years has been creative nonfiction. My education as a writer was in fiction, and when I got my MFA, the last thing I expected to do was to write versions of myself. I wanted to escape myself, anything to escape myself and give myself a more liberated and vital life. And somehow along the way, I started writing creative nonfiction, and people were interested in those books.
Yeah.
That's what I've continued to do. I don't think my story from here on out, but
it's not just been a couple. This is book, what, 7, 8?
It's book 7.
7. That's a lot. Someone would call that prolific at this point. So it's
maybe
crazy that you've not crazy is not the right word, but that you have you at one point aspired to get away from yourself and write fiction and just never left that behind. Do you ever see yourself turning to fiction?
Sure. In fiction, I think I'm better in a shorter form. I think it's really natural to me to write fiction over the long haul of a novel doesn't seem to align with my neurology. So the thing about creative nonfiction is that it does give you imaginative latitude. I feel like parts of the Joni book attempt to sink into her point of view. There's latitude in terms of different voices. There might be more latitude in creative nonfiction than there is in straightforward fiction.
I haven't thought about that.
You can make up the form as it goes along, which feels a lot like a Joni song. They're not written out of prescribed forms. They're acts of discovery as something.
So that said, tell me about Song So Wild and Blue.
Song So Wild and Blue is
A Life with the Music of Joni Mitchell is the subtitle.
Joni Mitchell. Thank you, Jason. Is essentially a love letter to the songs of Joni Mitchell, and they think about how they've shaped my creative life, as well as how they've shaped my life in general. That work has been my, creative, imaginative lodestar since I was in elementary school. I didn't become a real Joni Mitchell fan until I was in high school when Hijira had come out. But yeah, it's always been in the air. I've always been touched by the strange chords she uses, their lack of resolution, the dissonant notes, the space in them. It's like I knew that she was always walking alongside standard form. She's not so much of an experimentalist that she's far away or wide, all the way
Sure.
left. She's the strange kid who's able to sit with the cool kids. And
Yeah. It's okay. Before I say what I'm going to say, because then you might end the Zoom. You almost put out your water. Sorry about that. Was there something that in writing the book, was there something you learned about yourself that Joni impacted that you didn't even realize?
yeah, that's a good question. I realized that the songs were records of process. I used the term acts of discovery earlier on. And yeah, there's a sense of reaching from point to point. She doesn't know the outcome in the best of her songs. And that has felt essential to me, not just in terms of being a writer, but just in terms of living, open to inquiry. Her most iconic song, I Really Don't Know Life at All, which I think gets subsumed in the big statement of sound around that. But it's an important declaration. So
Okay.
that's part of it.
That you, I don't want this to become a therapy session for myself. However, I think I just learned so much about me in you describing these Joni songs. Earlier, you had talked about brushing up on your Joni Mitchell facts because you were worried that I might come in with some trivia. But that was not on my mind at all. I spent my morning listening to a bunch of Joni songs just to get in the vibe. And this is so sacrilegious for this conversation, but I'm realizing that Joni Mitchell is maybe cilantro in that the not prescribed form, some people can really lean into, and other people, it's like nails on a chalkboard, right?
Yeah.
And I've never really been able to articulate what about her songs make me uncomfortable. There is a discomfort sometimes. And yet, I love Both Sides Now because it's probably her most traditional sounding song.
Yeah, most of the songs, with the exception of something like Both Sides Now or Big Yellow Taxi,
Yes.
yeah, they make up their own form. They're not experiences of familiarity or comfort. I remember talking to one of my students about Taylor Swift's work, and this is not to deride her work at all by any means, but my student said sometimes you just want to hear music that doesn't make you think too hard, that you can hear in the background. And when a Joni Mitchell song comes on, you do have to put everything aside. And I've always been a sucker for that intimacy, that what I think of as a thumbprint of sound.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like anyone else. And
Well, but what I find even more fascinating, because I think, again, in this conversation, I came into this conversation not understanding why I'm not a huge Joni Mitchell fan, and I'm leaving fully understanding and can in turn appreciate her more. You said she's not so far to the other side. And that actually is part of my quote unquote problem, in that I think it's going to be traditional. It sounds like there's going to be resolution, but then there's not. It's not so different that I immediately know, oh, this isn't going to be for me. I listen to the music and I'm like, oh, yeah, this is going to be for me. And I'm like, wait, why am I feeling uncomfortable? And I think that's why.
Yeah. I love hearing that observation. Yeah, it's interesting. She could have evolved as a musician who was alternative and might have sold just a few records, but she's always, I think, been interested in some degree of popularity and visibility. James Taylor is a musician on some of the songs. A lot of mainstream people have been featured on her album.
It's like an indie movie that like won an Oscar.
Yes.
Do you
It's
know
true.
what I mean?
Yeah, that's it. But this is the wonderful thing about this is not something in all of my decades of life I still am learning about her. This is not something I would have known about her even when I finished the book. I feel like I'm still learning about the work and how she manages it and
Mhm.
how she thinks about audience.
You spent so much money on that alligator book. I want to read the article comparing Joni to an alligator. Like, what is
I knew you would ask that. Alligators are full of contradictions. Well, they spend a lot of time in water, but they can also live on land.
Lots of sitting still, but they can run very fast.
There you go. This doesn't sound good. They've been around a long time.
They're dinosaurs.
I don't think she would appreciate that because I think she really is like someone who is like really young in spirit. Yeah, alligators have thrived because they've been attuned to their own living.
Yeah. And stay true to themselves.
They do.
Yeah.
It's true.
This article writes itself, Paul.
Yeah. I'm going to present this to my agent.
You're welcome. I don't even need 10%.
I'll give it to you.
Oh, you're very kind. This is being recorded, so that's on the record.
I know. It's our vocal contract.
So funny. Yeah, that's so fascinating. And I think there's something so youthful and joyous about her as well, which again, I'm like, why is that not something that sits well with me? I'm gonna get so many messages after this episode. People are gonna be like, why do you hate Joni Mitchell? And I don't feel that way. I just never understood why some of the songs made me feel uncomfortable, and now I do.
Yeah. And there's that uncomfort, that discomfort is threaded in with intimacy. Like
Absolutely.
Intimacy doesn't feel good as much as humans might crave it. Yeah.
There's a vulnerability that comes with it.
Yeah.
My therapist would be like, lean into the discomfort.
Yeah. Easier said than done.
As I roll my eyes.
Therapist. Listens to some comforting song out in the car.
Exactly. Have you met her?
I haven't, but we had 10 seconds of sustained eye contact. And that's in the book. And I could tell she really liked me. And I liked her too. I was in the front row of a concert at Boston's Fleet Pavilion. It's no longer called that, back in 2020. And seated next to someone who was so enthusiastic that she was heckling Joni. So when Joni left, I guess you would say it was stage right. Mm-hmm. Someone said, "Joni, you're the best person." And Joni looked at me with such calm pity, and we both smiled at each other.
Yeah.
And it was a really sweet moment. Maybe one day I will meet her. Maybe this book will end up in her hands. My fantasy that she'll invite me and my boyfriend to have lunch sometime.
This is us manifesting. We love it. Is there something, if you could say one thing to her, what do you think it would be?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the bravery and courage of putting yourself out there. And I think putting oneself out there isn't simply about revelation or intimacy, but she's created a system of sound, vocal phrasing, guitar tunings that have been so liberating to me. I think she's someone who's incredibly self-attuned, aware of her body, and has a really strong rudder. And it sounds melodramatic to say that, but I think the constant example of that has saved my life.
That's very beautiful. No, that's beautiful.
Good. But it's true, really. When we have there's so much thrown at us to be anything but ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just the work has given me psychic strength.
Well, and I love that. And I think part of what's so interesting to me is my discomfort is very real. So it's so fascinating to me that you have the complete opposite experience. That's why I'm like, oh, this is cilantro. I really like cilantro, and my husband can't stand it. Music in general, it's so magical what it is capable of doing. And everyone, just like their palate for food, their palate for music is different and unique. And what moves one person doesn't necessarily move the other person or brings this person joy or that person joy.
And our palates change too, right?
Yeah, oh, of course.
Last week, I was listening to Chalk Mark and a Rainstorm, one of her 80s albums, an album that I dismissed as a bid for visibility and Grammy bait and all that. And I was listening through headphones, and I de-emphasized the vocals, but something in my listening was different in that, oh my God, I can hear how meticulous and stacked all these instruments are. This is about an experience of stacking. And it wasn't just pleasurable on the level of sound. I just thought, oh my God, this is about living through multiple layers and to sit with that.
I had a feeling after talking to you, I would be very interested in going back and revisiting, and I'll take some notes and I'll send them to you.
Oh, I love that.
To see how things shift and change. This is my instinct. Because I'm also going to want a list from you what are more songs that are like Yellow Taxi and Both Sides now, right? Like where should I go? You don't have to answer that right now. We can think about it. Okay, you are my guest gay reader. Is there anything that you are reading? Do you have any reading emotionally? Do you have any grievances you need to get off of your chest? I don't want my guests to like sit in anything that they really need to share. So if there's something that you need to get off your chest, now is your moment. It's a safe space.
Yeah. It's so hard to make air grievances at a moment when I feel like we're just all, or many of us are holding ourselves together. So I'm not even sure I know how to open that window or door.
Of course. This is part of why I've been asking people this, because there can be minutia that people don't even think about that they like genuinely want to say is so annoying to them, but they feel like the world is crumbling around them that they can't even stress about the minutia. Yeah. So I think that's where this sort of quote unquote segment comes from. Right. It's like, that stupid board that keeps falling off my dresser. It's like, well, why can't that just stay standing?
Construction on my street.
Oh, yes.
Over the Thanksgiving holiday, there was a manhole fire on my street. Oh my God. Something happened underground, and it sparked an electrical wire, and the electrical wire went all the way up to the 4th floor of the building across the street and set it on fire. And since then, since late November, the Con Edison or whatever force has been trying to remedy this. Mm-hmm. But it's clear that whatever is down there, making power, creating energy in our apartments, is barely held together. And that's not to blame the city or any particular.
Nope, it's just stating a fact.
It's stating a fact.
Right.
And I think it's going to be ongoing. And I think what luck it is for my apartment not to burn. I hate saying it because it could just as well have happened here.
Yeah. See, that's a good grievance, the construction and all of that. See? The world is crumbling, and yet this little thing you could get off your chest.
Yeah.
I'm here for you, Paul. I'm here for you.
I feel better.
You're good. Good. Paul Lisicky, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks so much. It's been so much
fun. So Wild and Blue, A Life with the Music of Joni Mitchell is out now. Everyone go get your copy. Order it from your local bookstore. Go pick it up at your local bookstore. Congratulations.
Thanks so much. It's been a delight.
Karissa and Paul, thank you so much for being here today. As I mentioned, I'll see you later this week with a special bonus episode. If you're not following on social media, make sure to do that. Gays Reading. And, all the things. Stay dry, stay healthy, stay sane. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. See you next week. Bye.